Thank you for asking if I support removing the blood quantum requirement from the Muscogee Creek Nation Public Office. Yes, I do. And the reason why is because my father, Elliot Ben Bruner, was a full blood. My mother, who was half, and my late brother Danny and myself, we are considered 3/4. Yet on a CDIB card, we are considered 23/32. Who made that mathematical determination? We are not Muscogee citizens only because a CDIB card says that we are either 1/2, 1/4, or 3/4. We're Muscogee citizens because we were brought up Muscogee citizens. My mom whispered in my ear when I was a baby that I was a Muscogee citizen. She taught me all my life that I was a member of the Muscogee Nation. She fought long and hard for the Muscogee values, and my mom and father also worked along with other Muscogee citizens to establish the 1979 Constitution. And unfortunately, in our Constitution, it says that if you are 1/4 or more, you are a full citizen, and that deems you adequate and qualified to run for office. If you're less than 1/4, you're not deemed qualified to run for public office. I don't think that's right, and I will support and seek a constitutional amendment to change that, because in my eyes and in my heart, if you're a Muscogee citizen, you should be treated equally. It's not right that we ask you as a citizen of the Muscogee Nation to vote for us, but because of a law or a restrictions, you're not allowed to serve with us. Thank you very much.
Not at this time. I feel that this should be a decision by the citizen, and there should be meetings conducted to where it would have meetings to include citizens, the citizens at large, the churches, ceremony grounds, the communities. As you realize, this was put in place by our ancestors. So in order, if it's the agreement with all citizens, it should be decided by them.
Right now, I'm against lowering the blood quantum requirement, basically in honor of those that wrote the Constitution. Many of them were full blood. Some of them were my relatives, and in honor of them, I would have to be against it. However, there is a period of time when there's a generational process that will have to address this question. I know that there are a high percentage of people that vote that are less than 1/4. However, also on the other end, there are a lot of people that are less than 1/4 that's enrolled that doesn't really get involved in the process of electing people in terms of registering to vote. People will take the benefits and they'll enjoy the benefits that's provided by the Creek Nation, but majority of them rather do not participate in the election process, and I think that has to improve as well. It is a question that will have to be certainly addressed at some point in time, because it also affects my family. So it is something that will have to be addressed in the future. But as of now, I am against lowering a blood quantum for the ability to run for public office.
I support maintaining the current standards the nation has for elected officials. And I say that because the Muscogee Creek Nation, as a political entity, we have a duty to maintain our cultural identity. And so I believe there's a correlation between blood quantum and an understanding or knowledge or experience with our cultural ways. And so I'm not saying that a person with higher blood quantum necessarily has that directly means that you have knowledge of our cultural ways. I'm not saying that a person with a lesser blood quantum doesn't have that knowledge. I'm just saying that I believe that there is a correlation between the two, and without research and data, we don't really know that. We don't really know that exact answer. But I do believe that there is, those individuals, who do participate in, in various areas of our cultural practices, do have the higher blood quantum. So, and it's in our best interest as a nation to be able to maintain that cultural identity within the leadership of our tribe. We're very fortunate that we still have a lot of cultural ways, with our ceremonial grounds, with our churches, within our communities, within certain homes. We have a lot of cultural knowledge that still exists, and so we're very fortunate in that. But there could be a time where we lose that, and we hear a lot about that. We hear a lot about that we're losing our culture and our language. However, I tend to look at it in terms of for me this is a very exciting time for us as a people, because while I understand it's getting less, but I feel like this is a great opportunity for us as a people to rejuvenate or even revitalize, and I know the understanding that goes along with those words, but to rejuvenate our cultural practices. We have a lot of people, we have a lot of knowledge that still exists, and so we need to create ways to educate more people on our culture and especially our language. Our language is going to play a particular part in that rejuvenation, revitalization, renaissance, whatever we want to call it, of our culture. And so, we have a great opportunity to be able to maintain that cultural identity within our tribe, within our people, within our leadership, within our elected officials. And I feel we need to tap into those resources. Not only our elders, but our youth. Our youth are doing some amazing work with the language, with how they're learning. They're discovering new ways of teaching and how they're based on how they learn. And so I've seen this because I'm in the community. I'm involved with our youth, and I've seen that within our Muscogee Youth Council that some of the participants within the Youth Council are doing some amazing work with our language, and I feel like that is, to me, that tells us that we have a vital culture and language, and so we need to be able to maintain that and educate more people in those areas, and like I said, really rejuvenate this culture within our people. And as we move forward in that area, then hopefully we'll see that this cultural identity will continue on through our leadership. And so at some point, this idea of maintaining cultural identity within our political leadership may not be an issue for all of our people. So I do stand by that to maintain our current standards within our elected officials.
At this time, I do not support the total elimination of the blood quantum. With that being said, I would be in support of the initiative petition if it gets the required amount of signatures needed to be on the ballot for a constitutional amendment, and with a 2/3 vote of the citizens saying yes, they would like to see the blood quantum removed, then yes, I would be in support of the elimination of the blood quantum, because as an elected official, that is our duty to uphold the Constitution.
I support our blood quantum of 1/4 because we have plenty of citizens that sit up there 3/4, 1/2, and 1/4. So I had to support our blood quantum.
Yes, I do support removing the blood quantum, although it's a constitutional requirement right now because all of the registered voters have to be at least 1/4 blood by Constitution, that it would have to go to a vote of the people. And speaking of people, the majority of citizens right now are either a quarter blood or less, so the majority of citizens cannot hold office at this time. So that's why I support representation of all citizens by allowing anyone who's a citizen to be allowed to run for office. And I would introduce legislation to have a constitutional question put on a ballot so that it could go to the people for that purpose. Thank you.
At the current time, and I've talked to different Creek citizens within the boundaries, outside the boundaries, at the current time, the consensus is they do not want the blood quantum requirement removed. And as chief, if that's what the people want, they need to have a constitutional convention and change that within the Constitution. I will support the change if that's what the people want as change for to lower the blood quantum to run for public office. So I think we need to look at how many people are below the blood quantum, how many people we have in our tribe that are below that blood quantum. So we can see how many people that requirement is impacting, how many people that requirement is leaving out. So, but if the people get together, and it is up to the people, it's not up to the chief. If they pass that and it comes across my desk to sign, then I will sign it. But currently, from the people around here, the people I've talked to, they think that we have enough people that could run for office with the quarter blood or more. So if you believe that this should be changed, then I do recommend that you get together, you ask the council to create a new constitutional convention to change it.
The question of do I support removing the blood quantum requirement for Muscogee Creek Nation public office, as our Constitution is very clear on the quarter-degree blood quantum. This question was answered during the constitutional referendum, and it was very clear that it was not supported.
For several years, I've listened to people object to this requirement. Usually the ones objecting are not full citizens. However, the noise has become louder, cannot be ignored. I support a thorough analysis of the census of tribal citizens to measure accurately the breadth of this concern, rather than depend on speculation. In the event the concerns are realistic and determinable, the people must be heard. It doesn't matter what the elected officials think, believe, or feel about this issue. I obviously benefit from the current rules. However, if scales are out of balance, I would support the will of the people in making substantive change to the modification of these requirements. Finally, I'd like to also say that during the campaign, a lady asked me what I thought about the border, making our candidates live within the borders. She was a full citizen that lived outside of the borders, and that's another thought that ought to be interjected in this conversation.
Thank you for asking about transparency, which is dear to me. One of the first things that I would ask for is that we pass a Freedom of Information Act. We as citizens don't just need to know about our investments. We need to know about our expenditures. We need to know where our casino monies are going. I will be transparent, and I can guarantee you that the expenditures of the executive branch and the chief's office will be online and be available to all our citizens. Transparency is what we need throughout this nation on all items, most especially expenditures. Thank you.
As you well know, transparency is a big plus for the Muscogee Creek Nation citizen, and I would incorporate the financials for the investment to the annual quarterly report or the annual report. In order to be transparent, I have to build the trust of the citizens. Thank you.
If there's one thing I'm very proud of, having served as a principal chief previously, is the fact that we were probably one of the most transparent administrations in the history of the Muscogee Creek Nation. We did an annual report, a semi-annual report that reflected where the tribes as well as the federal funding monies were going to, what programs was using those funds in a manner that it should be. There is a need for transparency of our investments. I think that's something that certainly needs to be done. I will have a plan in place, currently working with some people that are familiar with investments of the Muscogee Creek Nation, and a plan will be provided at a later time concerning this question.
With so as principal chief, one of the first things that I would do would be to evaluate all of the departments, to evaluate all of the processes that we have that are in place within the tribe. And so transparency, financial transparency of our investments will definitely need to be evaluated. Possibly, through a way to improve that would be to initiate some legislation, to emphasize quarterly reporting that could be disseminated through Muscogee media, through the newspaper, through social media. Get this information disseminated out to our community centers. Definitely more communication. Communication is key to any organization, and having availability to that information. That information is knowledge, and so we can easily make this information available, and like I said, either through policy or procedure, or if it has to come to it through law, that we disseminate this information in various ways.
Right now, the executive branch gives a quarterly report of the finances and the overall status of the nation. The finances are in the report, and that report goes out to Muscogee media outlet. It is in the paper, and it's also online for anyone to look at and see what the chief at the time has reported on. It's difficult to give all the information out of our investments because you also have to understand that it's a competitive market. I will give one example. Right now, our permanent fund is split 50-50 between Wells Fargo and the Bank of Oklahoma. After 2 years, we will see who has performed the best, and after those numbers are put together and we see who did the best, that investment group will have an opportunity to oversee the entire portfolio.
Well, first of all, we need to review the budgets. We need to make a timeline. We need to look at and target our funds that are a balance of that goal, and we need to make a strong review of those. The best thing itself, of course, is in businesses that we do, we also need to have a business plan. And in that business plan itself, it should show the profits and loss, of course, of that business.
I would advocate having certain financial documents made public because there are many companies that put their balance sheets, their income statements, and other type documents online for all of their constituents to see. We could have a secure site linked to our website where a citizen would be assigned a password and they could go in and access financial documents and any other documents related to our investments that would help them to get information about what's going on with the finances of the nation. We could also provide notice to all of the citizens whenever there's going to be a discussion, legislation, or any kind of committee vote made on financial investments, and then provide all the information again either through a secure website or by live streaming through a secure network. And so I believe that our nation should do a better job of providing this information to citizens, and right now there is a lot of secrecy with places like One Fire and Airbnb that could be open to the public, and by the public I mean the citizens, because we are a shareholder, we are a stakeholder in that business, and we deserve to have the information. And it's not unheard of for companies to put documents of financial interest out to their shareholders. So it's something that could and should be done and will be done under my administration. Mado.
That is a very good question. We do not have a lot of transparency of anything with the current administration, with the current council, especially on our business or our investments. Those reports should be made to the council, either in a quarterly session or a monthly meeting. It's just like any other board that I chair, any other board that I sit on. We have a secretary that gives their monthly report. We have a treasurer that gives their monthly report. Those things should be open to the public, and if the public would like to know, they need to attend those council meetings. They have committees of the council that meet prior to the council meeting. That information should be discussed there in that Business and Finance Committee meeting, and that should be put out to the public for everyone to hear and see, so you can watch it online. So if you're in Kansas, Texas, Tennessee, California, you should be able to see those. That information should be available to the people.
I believe that can be handled during the State of the Nation address, and that would be a good forum for it.
I personally was not aware I've never been asked, or I've never had anyone show an interest in the composition of the investment. We call it the permanent fund. While the Muscogee Creek Nation Constitution states that every disbursement is a matter of public record, some people might think that the investment schemes or strategies might be proprietary information. Nonetheless, the investments are the property of the people. Quarterly investment performance general presentations could be made available to anyone desiring this information. And again, I wasn't aware of huge interest in transparency in the investment account. I'm glad to see it.
Yes, I do have a plan. One of the first things I'd like to see us do for those many, many citizens who live outside our jurisdiction is to communicate more with them. But more importantly, I would love to see us give them a seat at the National Council. They are just as much a part of this nation as we are. There should be no distinction. Whenever they communicate with us to find out what's going on within the nation, they have a right and we have a duty to immediately respond to them and let them know what's going on. I had a conversation with a Muscogee citizen in California, and he indicated to me that they have the annual meeting where some councilmen attend, and he has to drive 5 hours to attend this meeting. And the last meeting he attended, I asked him, what did you gain from that besides the fellowship? He said, Steve, there were at least 400 of us there, and only 20 got enhanced identification cards. We can improve on this. We need to have more cultural events in the outlying areas. Thank you for asking.
Yes, my plan is to possibly get two at-large citizens, one on the east, one on the west coast, where they would communicate with the citizen or the at-large representative from the office to bring their issues, concerns, or their needs. And that way we can sit down, possibly bring them in quarterly or every 6 months and communicate with them to see what can we do to better communicate and service our at-large citizens.
Throughout my history as an elected official with the Muscogee Creek Nation, I have always been an advocate for our at-large citizens, in particular those that live outside of the state of Oklahoma. I'm coming up with a plan that I'm calling Greater At-Large Participation Gap. And the purpose of this program will be to certainly decrease the gap in terms of the services that are provided, the things that we do at Muscogee Creek Nation, to close that gap between the citizens and the Muscogee Creek Nation, and that program and the emphasis behind some of the things that we want to do with our at-large citizens that lives not only outside of jurisdiction but also outside the state. I believe it'll be for an exciting time, and I'm looking forward to presenting that plan later on.
again, as principal chief, the first thing would be to evaluate all of the departments, and looking at policies and procedures. I have a lot of experience working at the College of Muscogee Nation, creating a lot of policies and procedures and evaluating those policies, maintaining those policies. So from a policy standpoint, looking at what already exists within the nation, and some of the research that I've done in leadership. There's a book by Jim Collins. It's called Good to Great, and in this book, Jim Collins he talks about the flywheel effect and the doom loop effect. So the flywheel is whenever it's a mechanism that it takes some time to get going, but once it starts spinning, then it builds momentum, and it creates energy off of that momentum. And so once it gets going, then it can maintain itself and maintain maximum energy and work. So within our tribe, we have a lot of departments. We have a lot of programs that are working effectively, and that are maintaining. So what we see within the tribe is when a new administration comes in and dismantles everything, then that's the doom loop effect. So we have things operating at optimum level, and then an administration comes in and puts that to a stop. So that's the doom loop effect. So then it takes time to get that momentum built up, to get things moving again, to get us back up to speed. So I understand that there are areas within the tribe that are working. I understand there are areas of the tribe that need to be, that need to be have a closer look at. And I feel like with communication in general needs some improvement. Communication with our at-large citizens. We have a liaison for at-large citizens and communities, and personally, I think that is a great opportunity. I think that is a great program that we can utilize. Is it working effectively now? Those are some of the things that I really want to get in there and look at, and see what is working and see what we can build on. So maybe not necessarily to take it back to square one with some of these programs, but we can utilize technology. We have the technology. It just takes innovative and creative ways of thinking. How are we going to maximize the resources that we have within the nation? We have a lot of infrastructure in place. We have a lot of technology, communication. So we could easily communicate with our at-large citizens through Zoom telecasts, through Facebook Live, through YouTube channels. There's a lot of resources that are out there that we can connect with our at-large citizens and engage with our citizens. Ideally, we want to get out there personally, face to face, as much as we can, and actively engage with our at-large citizens, but we can also support them, quarterly or monthly through telecast meetings.
There's always room to improve on communication with our at-large citizens. One of the main things I hear from at-large citizens is they're not really sure what they're eligible for, since they don't live within our jurisdictional boundaries. Currently, we have a tribal liaison who is Mr. Jabon Gouge. Mr. Jabon Gouge is a great asset for the nation and his department, because he can communicate with the at-large citizens, keeping them up to date on what they are eligible for, what they are not eligible for, when events will be coming, when the nation will be putting on gatherings in their areas. But we could also add in monthly newsletters to our at-large citizens, as well as do a Facebook Live on a monthly basis.
Technology is one of them. Video communications or conferencing. The part itself about that we need to have live stream, within our council. Each council member itself, should be able to have a mic on so they can be heard as when they're speaking about the agendas, emails, websites. So, and each at-large group or organization itself should have their own representative. I believe that, that we're appointing a liaison itself, of course, to go and meet with these people is not doing the work, there for the at-large citizens. The at-large citizens itself can tell us what they have, of course, in their areas right there, what they need. And we can meet with them, we can talk with them, but voice communication is the best itself, for communications with our at-large people.
Well, first of all, we can use technology a lot more than we currently are doing at this time. There's video distancing, Skyping, web conferencing, live streaming. All of those things could be used to interact with at-large citizens. I'd also try to have an on-site presence as much as possible in those communities. Whenever they have meetings or events, try to make the rounds to get out and meet with the people, the at-large citizens, and then to expand self-governance programs, tribally funded programs, and our tribal sovereignty to include persons that live outside the jurisdiction. I think that we can do that because we are a sovereign nation and they are our citizens and they're Creek citizens no matter where they are. So we need to use our technology and our presence more to get in touch with those people and also to hear back from them about what their needs are and what they would like to see from the nation. Another thing that I would do is to institute a free and independent media so that they would have a source of information to get either through the newspaper or through the television show or the radio program, to be free and informed for all citizens. That's how I would work for the at-large citizens.
We currently have that office in place that works with at-large citizens. Under my administration, I would hope on a more large scale to really engage those citizens. I would hope at some future time the council would amend that to include an at-large council person that would represent the interests of those people. There's 4,000 Creeks that live in Texas, and that's just 3 hours away. So we need someone to engage those people. Their voice needs to be heard. It's not just about the people who live in Muscogee. It's not just about the people who live in the 11 counties. But, at large is north of Admiral Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. At large is east of Country Club Drive in Muscogee. At large is west of Wewoka Street downtown. So, or if you go south, once you cross the river, you're in at-large district. So we want all of our citizens to be heard. We want all our citizens to participate. We want to encourage that, and by doing that, we have to develop a strong at-large office that gets out and works with these people.
I believe the social media platforms, web links provide a very good conduit for communication, but how I would want to increase communication, I would make myself available from time to time to visit with not only citizens at large, but also the local communities.
Yes, I have a plan. I think the principal chief should visit regularly and listen to these people in their environment and spend some time with them. His office should encourage and enhance periodic and regularly scheduled meetings with the at-large citizens. Other tribes in California go out there regularly and in a more orderly fashion than we seem to. This year, California is kind of an example. In the past, California citizens looked forward to spending some time with candidates who would choose to visit out there during the election season. This year, this agenda allowed no time for that, and I thought it was really kind of poorly done. The current at-large office needs to have full financial support to do whatever is necessary to get something, I believe, a little more regular going on with our at-large citizens. Local communities that choose to host these at-large meetings generally have to raise their own money to do it, and I think that should change. I think the tribe should pay for it. I don't know whether they are or they aren't, but they should. The meetings should be professionally prepared and conducted, and they deserve good meetings out there, and they deserve more regularly scheduled things than once or twice a year.
Ladies and gentlemen, a free press is paramount to a free government, and any government has to have a free press. It is imperative, and unfortunately here in the Muscogee Nation we had an attempt to have a free press and it was nullified, and we have to return to those values. Our citizens deserve to know what's going on, both good and bad. There's just no use to have things that are hidden from our people. And my attempt to get a Freedom of Information Act will go a long ways in correcting that problem. But we need a board that oversees the Muscogee Nation News. And our employees and our reporters need to be able to report on any facts that occur, true facts, to our people so they know what's going on. They need to be able to report on things and not be afraid to lose their job. Thank you.
Yes, I do. I do support allowing citizens to vote on constitutional amendment for free press. As you remember, I did submit legislation to repeal NCA 18-180, which didn't pass. With communication with Chief, we were able to come to agreement and pass NCA 18-184. So I was in favor of doing that and always support the citizens.
Well, my background is in the media. I'm a very strong proponent for free press, for something that many of the people here recently felt very strong in, whether you were elected or part of the staff of Muscogee Media. It became very political, and it came from both sides of the aisle. I think that there are some things that we can do. If it means a constitutional amendment, so be it. It is a right of the people to present a constitutional amendment for free press, but there are other things, other caveats as far as information is concerned that we also should be concerned with or should be part of the Free Press Act. I think what was repealed, I believe, did not fit the Muscogee Creek Nation at this time. I do feel like, and a very strong supporter of having free press, and I think it's going to take the efforts of everyone involved, whether it's the staff, whether it's the National Council or Chief's Office, or even our citizens. And I would support allowing a vote on the constitutional amendment for free press.
So I feel like this and a couple of other similar questions regarding changes to the Constitution are twofold, actually, and so I'll answer this question that way. So, do I support allowing the citizens to vote on a constitutional amendment? So, of course, that is so in the Constitution. It clearly states there's only one way to change the Constitution, and that is through the National Council. It is initiated through the National Council with a constitutional amendment ordinance that needs to be passed by a 2/3 vote of the National Council and then on to a vote of the people by a 2/3 vote. So that is the process. That is the process, and of course, I support that entirely. Changing the Constitution is a huge thing. It's not an easy thing to do, as it should be. It should, changing the Constitution is a difficult process, as it should be. Because this is the foundation of our government. This is the governing document of our people, and so it should take a considerable time to evaluate what needs to be changed and then to initiate that process. So, but do I support that process? Absolutely, I support that process because, and I feel like it's not up to one person to determine what needs to be changed in the Constitution. It's not up to the chief. It's not up to one person who it's not up to that one person to determine what needs to be changed. It's up to the people, and so in respecting that the Constitution, this constitutional amendment ordinance starts with the National Council, because our National Council representatives are out there with the people in the community. And so if it's the will of the people, then it will come from the people to the National Council to be initiated through that constitutional amendment ordinance. So I totally support that. I totally support that process. Now, the issue of free press, do I support that issue of being amended in the Constitution or being added to the Constitution? Absolutely, I support that initiative to have a free press within our nation. That is an essential right of our people to have this information. Getting back to communication to all of our people, communication to our at-large citizens. This is vital. To have free press, to have a separation between our media outlet and our government is crucial to getting unbiased information to our people and to get this information, to get this knowledge, to educate our people on the issues that are taking place, whether it's good news or bad news. It all needs to be shared equally. So I do support that, adding that to our Constitution.
I would encourage all citizens to go online for the National Council website and look at NCA 19-031. It was a new law entitled SHIELD Act, and in my opinion, the SHIELD Act does give the Muscogee media free press.
Do I support allowing citizens to vote on constitutional amendments for free press? Well, that's Amendment 1. The people itself, of course, have that right to the right of press, of speech. They can assemble peaceably. They can make a petition itself, for grievances. They do have that right.
I believe freedom of the press is a basic human right, and as such, it is a means for our people, our citizens, to get unbiased, uncensored information so that they can make an informed decision about our nation, and that right now is what's missing. So yes, I believe that a free press is absolutely necessary for our nation to inform citizens of everything, good, bad, ugly, and let them make up their own minds about how they would like to see their nation run. Without that, they're only getting a one-sided story, and that's not considered free press. So yes, I would wholeheartedly support passing a constitutional amendment for a free press.
Yes, that is something that we need to do. We need to have that constitutional convention, and these are the questions that need to be brought up. If you want to talk about lowering the blood quantum, bring it up in this convention. If you want to talk about amending to have free press, yes. I believe, from what I've heard from all the people that have talked to me about it, is that free press is very critical. It shouldn't be, as chief, when I become chief, I shouldn't say and I shouldn't dictate what goes in our newspaper. It should be open, it should be free, it should be what is going on in our nation, good and bad. We have lots of good. Sad to say, sometimes we have bad things that get put in the newspaper. So I think everyone should be informed. Information is knowledge, and informing people what goes on in our nation is very critical. And to have a freedom of the press. That's what keeps a lot of things on the up and up, when there is accountability. And if you have a true person that reaches out and asks those questions, asks the right questions to say, is this true? And can you really back it up? Do you have the support when you write these stories? Can you justify, can you document? Those are the critical things. We want to have true journalism in our newspaper. It shouldn't be I guess you would call it it shouldn't be a newsletter. It should be a real, legitimate newspaper. And that's what I'm really going to support. And if it takes a constitutional amendment, then that's what we'll need to do.
Our Constitution allows for citizens of our nation to propose laws. I believe that it should be done by policy, and if the citizens choose to, they can propose a law, provided they follow the requirements of the Constitution.
Yes, that's an easy question to answer. I was extremely proud of the Muscogee Creek Nation joining only 3 other tribes in the nation with independent press legislation earlier. Conversely, I was appalled and disgusted with the repeal of this legislation and the flimsy excuses and reasoning put forth by elected officials. The ensuing dispute reflected poorly on the Muscogee Creek Nation and, in my opinion, was not concluded properly.
If you, like me, will read the Treaty of 1866, you will see where it clearly points out that the freedmen and their descendants are citizens of the Muscogee Nation and have every right that each of us have and should have. I believe in inclusion, not exclusion. I do not understand anyone who tries to exclude someone from the Muscogee Nation. We are all citizens of the nation, and we should all be treated equally. Thank you.
As you well know, per our Constitution, it does state that in order to be a citizen, you have to be a citizen by blood. And as my duty as a elected official, that I would have to abide by the Constitution.
As you know, the principal chief of the Muscogee Creek Nation has to adhere to and also follow the laws of the Muscogee Creek Nation. This is something that I know is being asked all the time about the freedmen. In 1979, there was a referendum to disenroll them. This is another question that has to be addressed at some point in time. There is a process in place, and I believe that process can be changed, but it's going to take the efforts of the people that are freedmen and to advocate for that. I think that right now, as the law stands, that I would have to support the law that says that the Constitution of the Creek Nation, that in order for you to be a citizen, you have to be by blood. And so as a chief, that's one thing that I would have to follow.
I maintain the current standards. I support the current standards of our citizenship for the Muscogee Creek Nation by descendancy to the Dawes rolls, and I say that because, again, as a political entity, it is in our best interest to maintain our cultural identity of the Muscogee people, and so therefore, it wouldn't be in our best interest to allow people who are not part of our lineage, part of the Muscogee Creek Nation lineage, to be a part of this nation, to be a part of the membership. So I support maintaining descendancy in as citizenship of the Muscogee Creek Nation. I support maintaining descendancy to the Dawes rolls as citizenship of the Muscogee Creek Nation. Again, we would be talking about an amendment to the Constitution. So I support that process. I support, again, if that is the will of the people, to change the Constitution, to allow freedmen as members of the Muscogee Creek Nation, then I would support that process of it being initiated by the National Council and then being voted on by the people. Again, that is not up to one individual. That is not up to one position, the principal chief. That is up to the people. And I would definitely support that process. But again, my personal stance is to maintain our current standards of membership within the Muscogee Creek Nation.
I will always support, always have, and always will support admittance of any citizen that can prove that they are a citizen by blood, which means they would have to be on the Dawes roll. As long as they're on the Dawes roll, they are eligible to be a citizen, regardless of where they live, what other ethnic backgrounds they may have. And at this point in time, that's all I can answer on that, because we are actively in litigation over this issue.
Well, it's in our Constitution. Our Constitution is already written. In the Constitution, of course, the Creek Nation itself is Amendment 3, Article 4 itself, where it states that our citizens itself, of course, are 4/4, to a quarter itself, of course, to hold office. And citizens below that bloodline itself, of course, they will be, they have all the rights and benefits itself, of course, of Creek Nation.
My position on admitting freedmen descendants into the Muscogee Creek Nation is this. In 1979, the freedmen were kicked off the rolls of the Creek Nation, and at that time, we had a new constitution ratified that stated only citizens by blood that could trace their ancestry back to the Dawes roll could be considered a citizen. And the problem with that is that I know many freedmen have Creek blood, but they were put on the freedmen roll back whenever the Dawes Commission was doing their work. And so we have that part of the citizens, freedmen that should be citizens. And then we also have the fact that the Dawes rolls are not infallible. I mean, humans can make mistakes, and they often did on the Dawes roll. And so to base a citizenship off of the Dawes roll only is also cause for mistakes. And so I believe that the freedmen could have their own tribal town, and then did in fact have a tribal town at one time. And so any of those descendants or any of the people who were on the rolls in 1979 and were kicked off, I believe could be put back on the rolls. And I would support having a question put on a ballot and put it to a vote of the people, because again, this is a constitutional requirement that all citizens be based on blood and traced back to the Dawes rolls. So this would have to be put to a vote of the people, which I would support doing that.
My position is that I had to prove that I was a Creek citizen. I had to prove my lineage back to someone that was on the Dawes roll. Same thing here. We create our new Constitution when we had the right to self-governance again in the 70s. And in that Constitution, we defined who is a member of our tribe. And it has been that way since the beginning of time, since time immemorial. You had to prove that you were born to a Creek woman, that you're a descendant from a Creek woman. Now you have to be a descendant from a Creek person that signed up on the rolls. But we all come from a tribal town. I'll come from Weelgufkee. So I followed my grandmother, my Muscogee Creek grandmother from Weelgufkee. So, and my dad did. Now my mother is not Creek, so we have to follow the grandmother. But for time immemorial, that's how it's been. That's where you receive your tribal town. So for these freedmen to come in, why are they not having to prove their Creek blood when I have to prove my Creek blood? I have 2 granddaughters that have not gotten enrolled in the Creek Nation because the current enrollment office says there's a problem or something going on with their dad's father's side. Well, just go off my blood. They can prove my blood. So even that side, they can prove his blood. But they said there's a discrepancy in one of them. So they just flat out refuse to enroll either one of them. So they have to, everyone has to prove it by blood. And if that Constitution from 1866 is what everyone hinges on, then what about the rest of that treaty? I'm sorry I said Constitution, but that treaty. So I know right now there's a lawsuit. They've taken it to D.C. I heard it's going to be remanded back to the lower court so we can make an opinion here. They can go through with it. They can follow it through. But my position is that you have to be Creek by blood.
And again, I refer back to the Constitution, which requires citizenship to be of quarter-degree blood quantum, that we would be descendants of those that are on the rolls, the 1906 rolls.
The treaty with the Creeks in 1866 is kind of an authority on this issue. The Muscogee Creek Nation was punished for essentially siding with the Confederacy during the Civil War. Lands were taken from the Muscogee Creek Nation to provide for other Indian tribes, among other things. I'd like to at this time read to you Article 2 of this treaty. And inasmuch as there are among the Creeks many persons of African descent who have no interest in the soil, it is stipulated that hereafter these persons lawfully residing in said Creek country under their laws and usages, or who have been residing in said country, may return within 1 year from the ratification of this treaty, and their descendants and such others of the same race as may be permitted by the laws of said nation to settle within the limits of the jurisdiction of the Creek Nation as citizens thereof, shall have and enjoy all the rights and privileges of native citizens, including an equal interest in the soil and national funds, and the laws of said nation shall be equally binding upon and give equal protection to all such persons. And I'll stop there. I don't know why the 1979 Constitution ignored the treaty language and instead got into this blood quantum thing. I've asked a lot of people about it, and it's still, as you know, a very volatile topic. There's strong feelings on both sides of the issue. I am not supportive of the politics of exclusion and believe we the people were all created equally. I further believe in the biblical notion of love one another. It has been harmful and hurtful to see how this issue has played out in other tribal governments in Oklahoma. I don't believe the monetary cost of exclusion is worth the resulting internal damage and harm.